Welcome to the What's Your Story podcast, where we share the extraordinary stories of women just like you in the hopes that you too will consider your own story and how God wants to use you for His glory. I'm Stephanie Cook, a life coach, Enneagram coach, speaker, empty nester, and big Tennessee Vols fan. My co-host, Hannah Conway, is a best-selling author of Christian fiction, mom of three, the social media marketing and women's ministry director at our local church in Clarksville, Tennessee, and she roots for the Kentucky Wildcats. Yet somehow, we make it work. We both love stories and consider it a privilege to meet new friends and introduce them to you each week. We are so glad that you are taking a few minutes of your day to spend time with us, and we hope that you'll be back for a new episode each week and share our podcast with your family and your friends. Now let's get to today's episode of the What's Your Story podcast. On today's episode, we are so excited to welcome Tracey Webb. Tracey recently published her first book, The Blossom Project, which is a 30-day devotional designed to help the reader spend time with the Master Gardner. Tracey has hosted an in-home Bible study called the Fun Not Boring Bible Study for more than 10 years, and she is the proud mom of adult sons, Caleb and Joshua. Growing up a church girl, Tracey never knew how much she would need to lean on her faith in later years as she would find herself on the outside of church culture looking in after going through a divorce and learning the best way to love and support her gay son while still remaining true to her faith. Today's conversation is so important around the topics of love, empathy, grace, and forgiveness, and we are incredibly grateful for Tracey's transparency and vulnerability as we learn from her. We also ask for grace as we realize we likely didn't get everything right in this conversation, but we hope that above all, we demonstrated the love of Jesus and our errors will be charged more to our ignorance than anything else. With that being said, let's get to today's episode of What's Your Story with our guest, Tracey Webb. Alrighty, Ms. Conway.
We are here.
We are here. Podcast number 2 for today.
I'm proud of us.
I know. I like it when we do a couple.
It is nice. It's nice. I feel
get ahead.
We've
kind of been like on the fly lately.
Oh, it's been crazy. I mean, we took our little winter break and then just trying to get back, and we've had just crazy stuff happen.
Yeah.
So, and I told you I hurt my back, right? And
yes.
Laundry. So I've decided that laundry is too dangerous for me to do from now on. You know, getting closer to 40, these weird things happen to my body. So
you just wait, sister friends. I went today because during 2020 was my 50, when I was supposed to have my checkup for being 50.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, around that time. Anyway, and so obviously I wasn't headed to any medical center in 2020.
Right,
like that wasn't
that just
happening.
wasn't a thing.
No, so then 2021, it just kind of slipped past me. So today I went for my routine physical and was poked and prodded, and all the women know what that means. And and now I have a colonoscopy scheduled. Fun times.
That's my
fun
future.
times ahead.
Oh, it's kind of like we're going to a mechanic or something. Like, what is that?
Yes.
Oh, I know. Sometimes Steven will try to complain about doctor stuff. I'm like, I don't even want to hear it, buddy. Do not want to hear it. Our female bodies go through so much. You just stop talking. But yeah. So my back is okay, but I'm going on laundry strike. Apparently it's too dangerous for me.
There you go. I think that's a thing. I mean,
I
obviously
know.
It's an OJI. You don't have to do it anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm excited about our guest today.
Yes.
We have a lot of interesting topics today, and she's got a lot of insight to share. So we're going to ask all the hard questions. She's given us permission to do that. So.
Yeah. And I won't lie, it makes me a little nervous.
I know. It does me too. Yeah.
But I'm excited because these are good. These are conversations that we need to have.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good
and
stuff.
I do want to say, and I don't think Tracey will mind me saying this before we start, not everyone will agree with everything that's said.
That's
not everyone
right.
will agree with us. They may not agree with her.
Yeah.
We're okay with that. And, we're having hard conversations. And I think that's the thing that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So welcome, Tracey Webb, to our podcast. All right. So introduce yourself. Tell our listeners who may not be familiar with you just a little bit about you and your family.
Okay. I'm Tracey Webb, and I was born and raised in Clarksville. I work at Austin P. I'm in my 13th year there. I work in housing and residence life. And I have 2 boys, Caleb and Joshua. And I was raised in a Christian home here, grew up in local Southern Baptist churches here. So, let's see. I grew up playing ball. Athletics were always like a huge thing for me, singing in church. I run now, and I'm learning to weightlift.
Yes, I love weightlifting.
Apparently, strength training is important for us as we get older. That's something I learned today. So
you have to come to boot camp with me, girl.
No. It's fun, but you wake up sometimes and you go, I don't know what's going to happen when I try to walk across the floor.
Right?
It's crazy.
That's my thing about working out is it's like then you can't go to the bathroom the next day because it hurts too bad to sit down.
Right.
So
accurate.
Yeah. So I'm impressed with you girls that are working out, that are doing all those things,
lifting those weights.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you worked with so one of our favorite podcast guests ever was Christy Winsler, who was a dear friend of ours, and you guys worked together, right? So
I loved her. We were actually single together for a time. We grew up together playing ball and everything, but for a while we were single together, and we sort of like she came to my Bible study. And we just went through some life together, and it was really good. And I got close to her, and then it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was also such a witness to watch her go through what she went through.
Right.
She was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Just relentlessly hopeful and appreciative. And she was just such a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
It was so hard to watch her. Even though we know she's healed now.
Right.
And that was God's plan. And she touched so many people through that. But
yeah, I've said so many times, an example of exactly how you should leave this earth. Like just amazing. And how, she changed my life watching her die. I mean, she literally changed my life.
Right.
So, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, you have written a book recently, so that's really exciting. It's a beautiful book called The Blossom Project.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about how that idea came to you. Have you always wanted to do that? And then a little bit about the book.
I did not always want to do that. I didn't even know that I could write in any capacity until when I started the Bible study. We had a jar, and the ladies would put subjects they wanted to talk about, and we would just like make the lesson straight up from that and just write it out. Luckily I grew up, my dad was a Sunday school teacher for like 50 something years. And he was not the kind of Sunday school teacher that just like read out of the book and looked at it on Saturday night. He studied it. And so, I learned how to do that from him. And so I guess I started writing a little bit with that. Then I went back to school. Some of my professors gave me some really good feedback and said, hey, you're really, you're a pretty good writer. And so I started also writing on Facebook. I would just like something would happen, and it was almost like I would start pondering something in my head, and it would just come out like a devotional because I've always loved devotionals. Mm-hmm. And so some of the girls in my Bible study started encouraging me, you need to write. And then my little brother, Justin, was like, you need to write something. He was on me all the time. I had a few ideas, but they just didn't really pan out. But I was reading a book. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite writers. And a big influence on him was George MacDonald. And he wrote a book about George MacDonald. And George MacDonald had a quote that said, the tree of the soul, before it blossoms, doesn't know what blossom it is to be. And that just like blew my mind. I was like, that's so true. Like, we're all trying to find God's big plan for us, but we don't really know why he gifted us the way he gifted us. Like, what is his intention? And so I started kind of researching flowers. And I realized that like in Victorian times, they couldn't be so outward about how they felt about people. They weren't, like today we're like, hey, what's up? This kind of thing. But they would send flowers, and different flowers had different meanings.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so I know like they could go, what's up with them? Or they could go, I never want to see you again with some flowers,
Wow.
Isn't that cool? And so then I realized, flowers all have different meanings. And I knew I wanted to do a 30-day because I really wanted to reach people who didn't usually do daily devotionals. And so I just filled in those 30 days with different flowers. And I was like, okay, now I just have to write these. And so I would write a few at a time, and then I would email them to my friend Paula. And I shouldn't have picked her because she was going to say anything I did was wonderful. But she would go, you have to write some more. And she sort of pushed me a little bit to keep doing it. And so finally, I got them all done. And we were the plan was I was just going to make copies in a 3-ring binder and give them to our Bible study ladies. Or whoever, and just let it. But then I realized, I could just publish this, and it took off from there. And my goal was, if I can sell 20 copies, that's going to be incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Uh-huh.
And then it's been amazing to see how God has gotten it into certain hands. Like a lot of men, it's weird because, it's kind of a girly looking book here.
Yeah.
It's about flowers, but
Right.
I've had a lot of really good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Although my dad did not read it correctly. He just sat down and read the whole thing. I said, you're not supposed to do it that way.
Well, I just confessed that
You did too?
I went straight to my favorite flower first, but then
you did?
and then I read the whole thing.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Anyway.
Yes.
The
But
point was I wanted the people to get a habit. If they would do it for 30 days, maybe they would start a habit
Right.
of daily devotion, because that's been my lifesaver through the last few years,
Yeah.
Some days a devotion, I just hung on to something that God gave me, and it got me through the day.
Right.
So I wanted that for other people.
Yeah. And I love that about it. So the kind of the format is every day's a flower, and then you tell a personal story typically, or some kind of encouragement or something with each day. And then it ends with a prayer. And so it's something that you could probably do in 10 minutes, 15 minutes each day.
Right.
Yeah.
But through that, you've shared, you grew up in the church, and, your dad was a Sunday school teacher. So I'm sure life has been super easy, and you've never had any heartaches at all whatsoever. And so this is just a beautiful story about how everything's been perfect, right?
No, it's a messy, messy story. Very messy.
Yeah. So, kind of back up and share a little bit about, you said when we were single, Christy and I worked together, and you were going through a hard time. So back up and share kind of the beginning of where things may have started getting a little messy, if you don't care, because our podcast is called What's Your Story? So we want to hear the story.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was married for 15 years to my kid's dad, who we have a wonderful relationship. He's a wonderful person, but, we got a divorce, and going through getting a divorce in the Christian culture is rough in any circumstance. But at the time, as I look back now, I wasn't where I should be spiritually. I mean, that's obvious that I wasn't, but I was like at the epicenter of Christian culture. I was up on the stage singing. I was in with the in-group, so you say, I don't know how to say that, but like anybody would have thought this girl has it together. Whatever.
You were serving in leadership roles in the church.
Yeah.
Your husband was too. Yeah,
definitely,
all the things.
Definitely. But the relationship, the real part of it was suffering. And I think was just ignored for several years. So anyway, end up getting a divorce. And I'm out in the world. And I think, and you'll have to understand, like, I grew up, I was a daddy's girl. I did anything to make him proud of me. So I did not have a wild streak ever. I was one of those girls. And so when I got a divorce, for the first few months afterward, I thought, okay, let's just see what we have here. I didn't last very long. I was like, oh no, I can't do that. That's not for me. But so what had happened was, at the end of that little time, I remember being in the little house that I was in as a single person, on the floor in the bathroom, just like, as we say in the South, squalling. Just like squalling, because I was like, I always knew who I was, even though my relationship with the Lord was probably not where it should have been. I knew who I was as far as I am a child of God. I knew that. So at this point in my life, I was just like on the ground. And I don't say this lightly because I don't like it when people go, and then God told me or God spoke to me, because I think that makes other people think, what am I doing wrong? Because God's not talking to me. But this is the only time it's happened in my life. And I was as low as I've ever been. And I was just crying, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I remember just saying, God, I don't really have much to offer you, but I'm lifting up my hands, fill them up. I need purpose, I need to be able to go forward. And I'm not going to say a voice came in, but I heard the Lord say, you're my child. It's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And it was very real. Mm-hmm. And from then on, I got it. That's when I started the Bible study. During that time, I didn't have the boys every weekend. That's really hard, when you're used to, I was a stay-at-home mom for years. And so then all of a sudden I don't have my kids with me some of the time. That was really weird. And so I had gone to my dad's house. He has this shelf of all these books, and I picked out a book, and it was called The Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by Philip Keller. And I read that book, and it was just life-changing to me because he had actually been a shepherd, and it goes through Psalm 23, and it was so real to me. And listen, every book that I love is from like 1970 and back. Okay. I don't know what's wrong with me. I gravitate to older books, probably because I'm getting them off my daddy's shelf. No offense. But anyway, so that book, it was like a beginning for me. And then from there, I was like, okay, what can I do? I have to do something. And so just like the Blossom Project, I sort of tend to want to reach out to people on the fringes. And at the time, I sort of felt like I was on the fringes because I'm a divorced person who feels a little bit like a pariah. I don't know where to go to church. I don't know what to do. And so I was trying to reach out to maybe some other ladies that might not usually go to church, And so we had our first Bible study and like 12 people came. Then we had another one and 0 people came. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what's this? But then the next time it just started building up, and it was really, those ladies were wonderful because we had like older ladies and younger ladies. It was a really good mix. And I called it the Ladies Fun, Not Boring Bible Study because I wanted to sort of reach out to people that wouldn't usually go to church, and just sort of disarm them and say, hey, it's not going to be like stuffy. We're going to be real. And we are. So.
And do you do this in your home? Were you doing this in your home?
Yes. My friend Paula.
Right.
She, that's been my friend since kindergarten. She's like my sister.
Yeah. Her last name's not Paula Dean, but it could be. It literally could be. She's a great host and an incredible cook.
Yes. Oh. And so we would switch off. Yeah. And it ended up mostly being at her house because she doesn't like to call it a she shed. I can't remember what she calls it, but it's a place that we can have.
It's a she shed.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't like that word. But we do crafts sometimes with the ladies and all that kind of stuff, but it's been wonderful. So.
Yeah. So you've been doing that for how many years now?
Golly, maybe 10, because that was, 10 or so. I don't know. I'm not good with dates. But it's been a long time.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Wow. So God brings you through the divorce and I hear exactly what you're saying. And now that I've read the Blossom Project, just hearing you talk so much about how identity it's the theme through the whole thing and how you felt like in that moment, like, I don't know who I am. Like I've lost everything that my identity was grounded in is now gone.
Right.
And so, if you go through that, I mean, it's hard because you lose your couple friends and then sounds like maybe you lost some church friends and so it's a really, really hard time. And so,
I just think they did. And I don't have any, I understand that because they didn't know what to do.
Yeah. So you came through that and you thought, okay, we're good. And then something else might have happened.
Yeah. My son, Josh, he around the age of 16, sort of a gradual process. He started sort of, I think he was around 16 when he said to me one time, I might be, it's not like I'm gay or anything, but like I might be bi. And he sort of said it like, a lot of people my age are, fluid or whatever like that. And I'm like going, what? And listen, a lot of moms will say, I knew. And it makes me feel like, well, I was pretty close to Josh and it didn't occur to me.
So you weren't.
No, I wasn't just waiting for him to say it. I was like, going, what are you talking about? Because just like 6 months ago, you're telling me about some girl that you liked. But I think that was part of Josh's process was he was like being very specific about the people he was attracted to. And it went down through this whole thing. And then all of a sudden he's saying he's bi. And I'm like going, what? It was out of left field for me. Mm-hmm. And so coming up through, I went to Southern Baptist churches all my life. I'm going, how can this be happening? Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
And Josh told me, he said it bothers him when parents act like it's so awful when their child comes out. And I think Josh has no way of understanding that, especially when you're raised up in the church environment, like it's a little bit of a grieving process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. First of all, not because of really the church environment. You have sort of an expectation of what your child's going to be. Mm-hmm. And that was never my expectation. And so you're sort of having to adjust some things, mm-hmm. And I know that I did and said some things during that time that I would have never done now, but you have to give yourself some grace. And we've had that conversation. I've told Josh before, you have to give me some grace and be patient. And you have to do that with other people too, because they're processing this, mm-hmm. What's amazing is I'm going to talk about my daddy all day, but he's been a Sunday school teacher, like the most close example of Jesus that I've ever known is my dad. And he has handled this whole thing beautifully. It's been incredible to watch him just love Josh unconditionally and be ready to defend, him. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, my family's been wonderful about it. And Josh has a really good, he can sense when somebody's just like, feeding him a line. And so I think that he does feel genuinely accepted by my family because they've done a great job, which is incredible. But so anyway, so he came out and it was a struggle too, because Josh is a makeup artist. And so he was like wearing makeup too. And so we would go out in public and we would get all of these people looking, which, to be fair, when you go out in public and you look different, you're going to have to expect that. Right. Josh was great with it. He was better than I was because I was like, mostly women would come up and go, your makeup's beautiful. Men would be really, like they would give him really harsh looks sometimes, and I would give him a harsh look right back. You know what I mean? I was like, come at me,
right.
Oh. So it was a process. And I always will I'll start reading a lot of things. And just realizing that I think the one thing that I want to say is like for other parents that are going through this, that are in the Christian culture, they need to remember to always tell their child, and I've told Josh this from the beginning, you're going to hear a lot of stuff and people are going to say a lot of things to you, but just always know that Jesus wants to have a relationship with you.
That's right.
And that he wants to pursue you no matter what, and that's never going to change.
Right.
There's nothing you can do. Josh asked Jesus into his heart when he was 7, and in proper Joshua fashion, I remember saying to him, do you want me to help you, lead you in the prayer? And he goes, no, I can do it. I mean, it was very passionate. Mm-hmm. It was one of the most moving conversions I've seen. So Josh at that time was put into Jesus's hands, and nothing can take him out. Because I have had people in the church tell me that they question Josh's salvation. And I'm like, he was 7 years old and he really meant that. And by the way, this person is okay. I'm going to say this, but like a lot of times the thing that bothers me about church culture is they're so hyper focused on the gay thing, and they're living a lifestyle that's not God's best.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But they get hyper focused on the gay thing. And I think that when Jesus looks at Josh, that's way down on the list of his concerns about him. I think he looks at Josh and says, come sit at the table with me. You're an honored guest at my table. I think people forget that Jesus belongs to Josh too. We don't have a monopoly on Jesus. And also, we don't give him to people. He's already Josh's, and they're on a journey together. He's an honored guest, and Jesus wants relationship with him, period.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his concern for him is when he looks at him, he doesn't go, oh, there's Josh, he's gay. He says, there's Josh. I hope he knows how much he's loved. What's the condition of his heart? There's all sorts of things.
Yeah. And Brother Larry said even last Sunday, maybe the Sunday before that in his sermon, we may not all share the same sins, but we all share the same sin. And I think you're exactly right that we forget, like we like to, in church culture, categorize things. We like to put, our little sins in this little pile and then big sins in that pile. And that's not how God sees it at all.
Or that someone's sin gives us the right to hate on them. And that is so un-Jesus-like. I can't even think of any other words to describe it. We are all, who are we ever to point a finger at someone? We are called to love them. Whether or not we agree with the lifestyle, we are just called to love them.
Well, I want to say, speaking of lifestyle, one of my favorite, this is really when I decided, okay, I want to have Tracey on the podcast, on social media, because you have been very vocal out there. And, definitely, I think you would probably agree with me that maybe when you wrote this statement, you may not have been in
it was pointed.
You may have been an angry mother, but I think it's on point. I think it's on point. Like your heart motive may not have been as pure as perhaps the statement sounds.
Right.
But what you said, there are all sorts of lifestyles that break God's heart. I'll bet being heartless towards people who are different than you is one of them.
Right. Because I noticed that, of course I notice it more because I have a gay child, but it's really, I'm going to tell you something. The Lord has really used this to open up my heart and make me a better follower of Jesus, because I have so much compassion. And, in my job, I deal with all sorts of folks. And now I don't see them as their label. They're just, they're people.
That's right.
That I need to love.
That are made in the image of God. They are image bearers.
Right. And I think that the lifestyle that I was talking about there is I think that the Christian community can be so dismissive and just downright mean. And they almost act like people who are different than them, especially the gay community, that they're less than. They take their humanity away or something. And that's nothing. And it makes me realize that there's so many people who don't really know Jesus on a deep level, because the character of Jesus is someone who's compassionate. He's loving. He's got a servant's heart. He's humble. And the kind of things you see, the lashing out and all that, has nothing to do. Jesus wouldn't want anybody with the label of Christian to treat someone like that. So, and I also had another incident that stemmed from an incident where it's probably one of the most heartbreaking incidents I've ever had is I was sitting at a table with some folks that I loved, that I looked up to spiritually. And a couple of them had been Sunday school teachers for years and years and years. And I think they forgot themselves. They forgot the deal here, that they're sitting with the mother of a person that happens to be gay. And they started talking about the gay community, and they were being heartless about it. And one of the ladies said, well, I have news for them. They're going to hell. And she said it almost with a gleam in her eye. And I thought, and so I had all this come up in me, and I thought the best thing for me to do is just remove myself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And I got in the car and I just cried my eyes out. Mm-hmm. Because I was like, they don't know who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. They don't know who he is, you know? Mm-hmm. Because to me, I had a mother of someone in the Christian community call me one day. Her daughter had just come out, and she was upset. And she was asking me all these questions, and she goes, well, what will you do if Josh gets a boyfriend and brings a boyfriend home? You're not going to allow that in your house, are you? And I said, well, what advantage would it be for me to reject him? To me, I see it now as that person will be another person that I'll try to point towards Jesus.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, that's all I know to do. Like, you know, when the blind man, when Jesus healed him and the Pharisees were asking all these questions, and at some point he just goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know
He's like,
is he
I don't know. That's right.
And I think you need to have the wisdom to say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. All I know is that's my baby. And my job is to love him and to point him toward relationship with Jesus, and never let him forget, no matter what the world says, that he has an honored seat at the table. And I think that's what I would say for the church. That's what I want. I want them to not see Josh as his label, because that's such a small part of who he is.
Right.
And I want them to understand and give him a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. Because we're all on level ground. I think that some families do choose the rejection. They just reject it, but I don't understand how that helps. If you reject and you completely close and cement that door, how is that going to help them find Jesus?
Right.
And also a point I wanted to make about in the church, we use this phrase a lot, and it drives me crazy.
Love the sin and hate,
not, yeah.
I knew what you were going to say.
Love the sinner and hate the sin. But like for someone who is gay, that's their identity. That's part of their identity. So you're basically calling them a big old ball. Mm-hmm. You are sin. Mm-hmm. But we don't do that with other things. To me, you can't do that. We've got to stop doing that. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so strange to me that in the church, people will want to say, well, you have to come to someone in love and call them out on their sin. But to me, in my own personal life, I have a handful of people that I would feel comfortable doing that with.
Right. You have to have a relationship with someone.
You have to have a long-standing relationship to do that. But they feel free to like go, hey, you can't do that. And basically say, you need to clean yourself up before you can come
to
Jesus.
Totally. Right. And Jesus totally, he talks about that. He's like, why are you worried about, your brother with his speck in his eye when you can log in yours? Like, check yourself.
Well, and scripture says he died for us while we were still sinners. Like that. Right. It's not, you don't clean up and then you get to accept the gift of salvation. That's not how it works.
And it takes the same amount of grace to save me as it did you. Mm-hmm. We act like it takes a little bit more grace to clean up some people. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And also the day we enter heaven, the only reason that we would get there is because we're clean because of what Jesus did. Other than that, we're all.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was in a group with a pastor who was sharing his testimony. I love this statement so much. And he said, if I'm being honest, for years, I thought, it would have just taken a lash or two for me. Like my sin wasn't big enough that God had to die for that. It wasn't that big that Christ had to go to the cross. I mean, they could have, just maybe whipped him a time or two. And he was like, I had to come to terms with it. That's how I viewed the world, that I was walking through life as if I had it all together and someone else, deserved the actual crucifixion. And I just, felt like a couple of lashes would have done it for me. And I was like, that is such a profound statement. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, sometimes we go through life like that.
Right.
We're not that bad.
We're not that bad. Right.
And in fact,
I could be like that, or I could be doing that, or it could be much worse.
We're in serious denial about our sin and why Jesus came.
Yeah.
So,
This has really opened up a whole new facet of being able to encourage and love on people for me, because it's funny how God has brought so many different folks across my path. New friends that I've made that happen to be gay. And then when I get to talking to them, they have the same background in the church as I do, grew up singing in the choir. They feel alienated, but they love Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it gives me a chance to love on them and to tell them, hey, Jesus wants relationship with you. I mean, I feel so honored to be able to love on folks like that. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the way God has opened my heart and opened my eyes to different ways to encourage folks.
Yeah. And I love you saying, I don't know. I think that's okay. I think sometimes we just say, I don't know, but I think I'm supposed to love.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, but I think that's what I'm supposed to do.
Because I get really uncomfortable sometimes in these kind of conversations, because it goes to sometimes, and not meaning to, some church speak that I'm thinking, if Josh heard that, that would be hurtful to him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and we say, we're going to love you out of that lifestyle. Right. And so if you say that to him, he's like, I don't want to come out of this lifestyle.
That's a rejection.
I don't want to come out of this is who I am.
Right.
Am I wrong about this?
Right.
Is that kind of what?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand that when someone believes that they're born a certain way, it doesn't matter what you think or if you actually think that's true. That's what they think. And that's true to them. And so to tell them otherwise is hurtful, you know?
Right.
It's different than, you can, using the example of somebody that, we're all born with bents to be a certain way, certain traits and all that kind of thing. But this is a identity thing that's so deep. It's just a hard thing to maneuver.
Yeah.
And like I said, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I go,
I don't know.
You're like, I don't know.
I don't want to say or do anything. I don't know. I'm choose to love. And that doesn't mean I don't dismiss anything, take anything away from what's in the Bible, because I love the Bible.
Right.
But I don't know. So I'm going to love, and I'm going to encourage other parents that have children that are in the gay community to just love them, and point them toward Jesus, because that's Jesus's job. That's a Holy Spirit's job. Whatever he's going to do with them, he's going to do, just like he's working on me and will be till the day I die.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the phrase that proximity brings empathy. And I think you and I talked about it a little bit. I think that until you walk in your shoes, whatever that is, with someone else's shoes, you just have no idea. And I think if we could all really be more mindful of, I've thought about many times, what would I do? How would I handle this situation? Whether it's that or something else, with your kids and with your family, with your relatives, with loved ones, with your friends. It's just, until that is your story, I think it's just safe to not cast judgment.
Right.
Right. Definitely.
Just to love others. Like, I really do. I feel like I'm going to get to heaven and Jesus is going to be like, girlfriend, all I asked was just you to love people. Like, let me sort out the rest. You just love them. And I'm going to be like, I am so sorry.
Right. Yeah. And it's not just with this. I mean, it's with so many things.
Right.
So many things in church culture. I'll use Tracey's word. Church culture. We just rip each other to shreds. And if we're ripping each other apart inside the church, why would anyone outside ever want to be a part of that?
Right.
Like, what is it that we think that we're doing that's like, how is that the light of the world? You know, how is that? I just wrote a 28-day devotional on love and how God loves us. And it has just like opened my eyes to how many times in Scripture we are told, I am love. You know, God is love. Perfect love casts out fear. You know, I got to love the world. I mean, there's just so many things. And it's like, that's the theme. Like, that's it. Like, that's the theme.
Right.
That's the theme.
Right.
So Jesus loves Josh. He learned that song when he was probably 2 years old.
Right.
And Jesus still loves Josh.
Right. And Josh is on a journey with Jesus, just like I am, and he will be. Jesus will be pursuing him till the end. And that's, as a mother, that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
I've got to trust him to do that. You know, so.
Yeah. So is there anything you wanted to say that we have not said, or anything that we've said that you want to correct? Because you certainly have every right to do that.
I don't know. I don't even remember all that we've said, to be honest.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want, I hope that other parents, I'm just like, all I can do is try to encourage other parents to get into the Word and know who Jesus is. That will give you so much comfort, and it helps to deal with it. When you know who Jesus is and that he's pursuing your child, and your child has an honored seat at Jesus's table. That's not going to always be reflected in the church, but it's still true, you know?
Yeah. Another illustration recently that Brother Larry used was, he said, you know, in going through your faith journey, if you've been in church culture for a long, long time, and we all of us have, he said, it's like a boat, you know, that's going on the water all the time. And he's like, if you leave a boat in water too long, then all these things start attaching to the bottom of it, you know, all these barnacles. And he's like, and every once in a while, you've just got to take the boat out and clean off all the barnacles, because it can't move, smoothly through the water any longer. And that's what sometimes happens in quote, church culture. We pick up something a pastor says, or, you know, like you said, a spiritual giant that we look up to, and it's not biblical. It attaches to our boat.
Right.
And every once in a while, you just, like you said, it's like, just get in the Word of God and go to what does the Bible say? What is truth? And not necessarily the opinions of men and women that, you know, are interpreting that as, and like you said, not out of malice or maliciousness or ill will or any of that. It's just, we're not God. We're not God.
Right. And be willing to say, I don't know.
I love that. That's going to be my new go-to.
Like,
I
don't know.
But we do know the two greatest commandments is to love God and love others. Like, it's that the end of the day, that is what we're called to. And that's what Jesus said himself. So love everyone.
And that community, they are image bearers of God, just like we are.
All day.
There is no difference in their value.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love the scripture where Jesus says to the Pharisees and Sadducees, I believe, he says, I don't want your sacrifices. I want your mercy.
Yes.
Well, we always wrap up our podcast with a question. Hannah, you want to ask it?
Absolutely. What's your favorite story? It can be real, fake, movie, Bible.
Okay. My favorite story is, and this was like a big life changer for me when I was little. My Uncle Jimmy was a preacher, and he had a lot of books like my dad did, but he had this book called by Shel Silverstein, The Giving Tree. And I remember reading that, and the tree just gives everything to the boy that he loves. And to me, that's what Jesus has, a servant's heart, and we're supposed to emulate Jesus, you know. And I think that made a big impression on me to go, wow, that's how I should be. I should be just like encouraging others and just giving myself to other people. You know, that's my favorite book, my favorite story.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't read that in a long time.
Well, we will be sure to link where people can get the Blossom Project on Amazon. I know, because that's where I got mine.
Yeah.
And we'll link that in our show notes so folks can find you. And then I feel like you would be very open to anyone that's struggling going through some of the stuff that we've talked about to reach out. And
definitely.
Yeah.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to go on record and say anything we've said that has been offensive, just,
Right.
please accept our apologies because we're learning. We're learning. And so I am sure that we didn't get it all right today.
Right.
But we're learning.
I still don't get it all right. And
But the last thing I would ever want to do is hurt Josh or anyone else. So, I just, I want to go on record and say, charge it to my head, not my heart.
Right.
Like we're coming at this really with, our hearts are just open. Like we want for people to hear our hearts that we love you, we love everyone, and this is it's a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
We hope that, like us, you learned a lot from Tracey today. I know personally, I plan to simply say, I don't know, a lot more often. If you know her, reach out and let her know how much it meant to you for her to share her story with us. If you are having some of the same difficulties in your life, you can find her contact information in our show notes, and we know she'd be happy to try to encourage you. Above all else, we just all want to love better. Speaking of love, I have written a 28-day devotional called Oh, How He Loves Us to be used during the month of February. If you would like a free copy, you can visit my website, stephaniecook.org, and download it from there. It will only be available through Tuesday, February 1st, so act quickly to get your free copy. Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you again next week for another episode of the What's Your Story podcast.